Vine sat huddled in a corner of her bedroom, her knees pulled up to her chest, and tears streaking down her cheeks. Her mother's harsh words echoed in her ears, cutting deeper with each syllable. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of her own existence. Her mother, who was calling her too loudly for anyone to listen if they were outside the room. She was going to slap her again, but her hand was stopped by another muscular, rough, and manly hand. She looked behind to see Jungkook, his usually stoic expression twisted into a mask of concern. Jungkook is her best friend and visits her from time to time. They are together almost every second. Today was normal and usual. He visited her. Her mother offered some tea, but this never happened in his presence. Her mom beating her. He heard their conversation and tried his best to stay out of it until he couldn't anymore. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him, the anger rising beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Fine. He approached her and sat beside her, saying softly, his voice a stark contrast to the venomous tone that had filled the room moments ago. What's going on? Fine looked up, his tear stained face meeting Jungkook's, and for a moment she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter a word, her mother's shrill voice cut through the silence like a knife. What are you doing here? Her mother spat, her eyes narrowing into slits as she glared at Jungkook. This is none of your business. You're sure you're a human? He screamed, looking dead in her mother's eyes. How could you do that to your own daughter? Get out of my house. You're no longer allowed here, her mother said, looking back at him. You know, it's people like you who make me regret that I used to long for a mother. Jungkook's jaw clenched as he took a step forward, his gaze unwavering as he faced Vine's mother head on. I'm not going to forgive you if you even touch her once again. Are you getting out, or I should call the police? Just who the hell are you to meddle in our family affairs? Actually, I am, he said, his voice laced with steel. Vine is my wife, and from now on, she is under my protection. That means you don't get to lay a hand on her anymore. Vine's mother recoiled, shock registering on her face as she processed Jungkook's words. Jungkook didn't move, kept looking at her with such seriousness as if it was actually true. She opened her mouth to protest, but Jungkook held up a hand, cutting her off before she could speak. I heard what you were saying to her just now, he continued, his voice ice cold, and I won't stand for it. Vine deserves better than this, and as long as she is with me, she'll never have to endure your abuse again. The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air as Vine's mother struggled to find words to respond. But before she could master a reply, Jungkook turned on his heel and marched over to Vine, pulling her into his arms and holding her tightly against his chest. It's okay, Vine, he whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever again. She was looking at him, and she couldn't believe it. She heard all of this. Her heart fluttered for him for a second. It felt as if a flower bloomed in her heart. Wine buried her face in Jungkook's chest, her tears soaking through the fabric of his shirt as she clung to him like a lifetime. In that moment, she felt a sense of relief wash over her, knowing that she wasn't alone, that she had someone who would always be there to protect her. As the tense atmosphere hung heavy in the room, Vine's mother finally found her voice, her words dripping with contempt. And who do you think you are, Vine? You're my daughter. How could you take his side? I'm not going to forgive you for this. And you, how dare you marry her without my consent? She shouted. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, his jaws set in a steely resolve. I'm the man who loves her more than anything in this world, he declared, his voice unwavering. And I won't stand by while you continue to hurt her. Vine's mother scoffed, her disbelief turning to anger. You think you can just swoop in and play the hero, do you? She spat, her eyes blazing with fury. You have no right to interfere in our family affairs. Jungkook's grip on Vine tightened, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive. She is my wife, he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. That makes her my family, and I'll be damned if I let anyone hurt her, including you. Vine watched the exchange fold, her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. She couldn't believe Jungkook was standing up to her mother like this, putting himself in harm's way to protect her. But before she could find the words to express her feelings, her mother's piercing gaze landed on her once more, a bitter sneer curling her lips. And what do you have to say for yourself, Vine? She demanded, her voice laced with venom. Are you just going to stand there and let this man dictate your life? Vine's throat tightened, her heart aching with the weight of her mother's words. She knew she should speak up, defend herself, but the words got in her throat, suffocating her with their intensity, just like they always had when she was with her mother. Jungkook sensed her distress, his eyes softening as he turned to look at her. Hey, he murmured, his voice gentle as he reached out to brush a stray tear from her cheek. You don't have to say anything. I'm here for you, no matter what. Vine's breath caught in her chest at his words, her heart swelling with emotions of warmth and love at the same time. For the man who had become her rock, her anchor in the storm. She reached out to grasp his hand, squeezing it tightly as she drew strength from his unwavering presence. And as she looked into Jungkook's eyes, she knew that no matter what her mother said or did, she had found someone who would stand by her side, someone who would love and protect her until the end of time. And for that, she would be eternally grateful. Jungkook led Vine out of the room, his hand firmly clasped into hers. As they returned from the tense atmosphere, with her mother trying to stop them, screaming Vine's name from behind, but they walked in silence without caring about anything for a few moments, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy between them. Finally, when they sat in the car, Jungkook spoke, his voice soft as he broke the silence. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes searching hers for any sign of distress. Vine nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Yeah, I'm fine, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Thanks to you. Jungkook returned her smile, his heart swelling with warmth at her words. You don't have to thank me, he said earnestly. I'll always be here for you. You can count on me whenever you want, and I won't ask anything in return. Vine squeezed his hand gratefully, her heart overflowing with emotion. I know, she murmured, her voice filled with conviction. You're always like that, at least with me, but I don't have a home now. She let out a laugh which was full of emotions, a mix of positive and negative ones. Jungkook's expression softened, his eyes reflecting the depths of his feelings for her. I just said I could do anything for you, and you're crying over a house. I can get you a new house, or maybe you could live with me, he said and looked at her immediately to see her reaction. Vine felt her heart swell with emotions at his words, her eyes misting with unshed tears. She just nodded once, a small nod which made his heart know that she sometimes feels the way that he does towards her. I don't know what I did to deserve you, she whispered, her voice choked with emotions. Jungkook reached out to gently brush a tear from her cheek, his touch sending shivers down her spine. You didn't have to do anything, he murmured, his voice filled with tenderness. You're perfect just the way you are. As they were lost in each other's eyes, Jungkook blinked and looked at Vine with a determined look in his eyes. Let's go home together, he said softly, his voice filled with promise. She nodded and he started driving the car, which led them to start a new story of them, and this time together.